I just did a refret job on this old Seagull here, and turns out one of the frets, the 12th fret, actually somehow it was a little bit high on both the high E string and the low E string. So I'm going to show you real quick how I kind of do a little bit of spot leveling on this. So I've already fixed the high E string side, so I'll do the low E side, let you see how I do it. So we can see here if I play the 10th fret, it's good, right? 12th fret, good. 11th fret, I got a little bit of rattle. What that's doing is right here, since I'm fretting the 11th fret, it's rattling right under the string on the 12th fret. And I know that the 12th fret is what's high because 11th fret is okay unless I really get on it. 12th fret is good. Most other frets are fine. But I can really hear the rattle when I get on that 11th fret. So I'm going to spot level this a little bit using one of these little micro belt sanders like you get from Hobby Lobby. So here's the tool. It's a little tiny belt, well they call it a belt sander I guess because the sandpaper forms a belt, so I guess technically this is a belt sander. Although it's not normally what we think of when we think belt sander, right? Normally you think of a power tool. So to level this fret, all I'm going to do, let's see if I can do this where you can see it, is I'm just going to move the string away from the 12th fret and then just sand right there on the crown of the 12th fret. And we'll just sand a little bit right off the top where the string passes over. And we keep trying it until it no longer rattles. These little belt sanders, they usually come with 3 or 4 different grits of sandpaper, and I'm using the finest grit that they have. I did this very same thing on the treble side. I don't know, for whatever reason, I think maybe the fret, whenever I hammered it in, it didn't get all the way, you know, maybe it's just lifted a tiny bit, but rather than try to hammer on it, since I've already leveled and crowned all of these frets, I figure I'll just adjust the fret height directly right under this little spot. Usually whenever you want to do a spot leveling, usually when people are tempted to do that, it's because somewhere along in the other part of the fingerboard here, one of the frets is worn excessively, like on a note that you play all the time, it will wear heavily there, or maybe under where you play a D there on the B string, you know, the 3rd fret, and you'll get a really deep divot there, a wear spot on the fret. That's really common. And then what happens is when you play that fret, you play that string on that fret, then it'll buzz on the next fret. And so then you might think, oh hey, I can use Josh's technique here to go and, you know, use one of those little belt sanders and sand off some of this fret, the 4th fret, and make that buzz go away. That doesn't work at all, because really the problem is one fret is really, really low. The problem I have here is that one is high. The other thing you fight with whenever you refret a guitar is, especially like this was 27 years old, and so after a long time, the wood kind of moves around and wears a little bit and takes a new shape. So you basically have to level the frets, even though the fingerboard might not be perfectly, you know, flat or radiused exactly right all up and down the fingerboard. The only way to avoid that, which is what I did with the previous guitar I fretted, to make the fingerboard right, is if you pull all the frets out and the nut and everything, and then you can just sort of level the fingerboard using a radius block. If I was doing a complete refret on an electric guitar or something, then I would do that. But on this guitar, I didn't, mostly because I was only going to refret the first 12 frets, and I wasn't actually pulling all the frets out. These frets beyond the body joint didn't have any wear on them at all. Had like no noticeable wear, so I didn't want to refret the whole fingerboard. I just wanted to do the first 12 frets. The other reason why I kind of only wanted to do the first 12 frets is because it's really hard with to crown and to run the edges of these frets over the body for a neck that's glued in like this. And so, you know, if you remove the neck, then it's much easier to, you know, work on those frets. But of course, removing the neck on an acoustic guitar, not something you ordinarily would do. Now, unfortunately, what happened is that while I was working on this, one of the blows of the fret hammer was too hard, and believe it or not, it actually cracked and broke the neck off. And you can kind of look at that pictures and things on my blog and see how that worked out. But it broke the neck smooth off of the guitar, and so I had to glue it back on. So anyway, I actually did wind up having the whole entire neck off of the guitar when I did these frets. So I could have done all, however many there are, 17, 19 frets that are on this guitar. But I chose to only do the 12. But as you can see, you know, just a little bit of work on this thing, and we'll get this fret down to the level that it doesn't rattle. Then we have a new problem. Once we get this fret sanded down, the top of the fret is actually going to be flat, and we don't want the top of the fret to be flat. We want it to be crowned correctly. So then I've got to re-crown the edge of this fret, and of course, you know, when you re-crown the fret, then you wind up putting scratches in it or grooves from the fretting file, from the crown file. And so then once I re-crown the fret, then I will have to sand on it a little bit. Next time all the strings are off of the guitar, then I'll go and actually re-polish all of the frets, including this 12th fret that I've kind of munched up a little bit because I had to re-work on it after it was all together. So we're getting really, really close here to getting this thing exactly right. Since I'm using a kind of a fine sandpaper on this thing, it takes a little while to do it, but you can see there, now we're good to go. You know, mostly we want to check and make sure that we don't go too low, so that this one then is too low, and then I have to do this all the way up onto the fingerboard extension here. You know, that'd be a really bad thing. By the way, these are a really handy tool to have around if you're ever going to work on guitars. The other thing that this little micro sander is good for is if you put super glue in to fill a dent or something, or a chip, and then you want to sand that spot. See, there we go, we're almost there. You want to sand that spot, then it's a really good idea to use one of these things to sand, because you can sand just a little tiny spot rather than getting the sandpaper over on the rest of the body. Okay, so that right there, I'm going to call that close enough. And the reason why I don't want to go any deeper on this right now is in, you know, a year or something, after I play this guitar a lot, eventually I'll go and re-level and crown all of the frets, you know, sort of as a maintenance. So I don't want to take too much material off this fret, because it will wear the other frets around it, and all of them are going to need to be re-crowned. And then also playing on the 12th fret, which is more common than the 11th fret, frankly, is going to wear this fret faster than the 11th fret. So I'm giving it a little bit of room to grow there, so I'm not gonna run it down all the way. So now I'm going to fix the crown on the edge of this fret where I sanded it down. Let me see if we can get the guitar real close. Maybe it's pretty much impossible to tell, but on the top edge of that fret, right on the edge, it's really flat where I sanded it. So the crown is pretty hosed on that guy. So we're going to fix it. We're going to fix it with a crowning file. If you look at the crowning file, it kind of, well, the camera won't focus on it, but what a crowning file, fret crown file is on the edges is where it files, and it's shaped like a curve, you know, like the crown of the fret. So we're going to hit it with the fret crowning file, and we're going to hit it a little bit with this, which is 400 grit sandpaper, and then we're going to hit it with this, well, this is 400 grit and this is 1000 grit. So we'll use a little 400 grit to knock the fret crown grooves off, which are put in by the crowning file, and then use the 1000 grit to sort of polish it a little bit. Again, the polish on these frets is not going to be perfect like the rest of them, but it's a 12th fret under the low E string, which you almost never play, number one. And number two, next time I have the strings off the guitar, we'll polish all of them again. So to crown this thing, I mean, it's just really simple. But in order to do this, I'm going to actually loosen the string, and then basically hit the edge of and I'm only going to crown to the very end of it. I don't want to redo the whole fret. So I got the 12th fret crowned and leveled now. Doesn't buzz anymore. Guitar plays like a dream. Hard to beat, a new set of frets on a 27-year-old guitar. It really plays great, and even though I broke the neck off of this thing in the process, you know, I glued it back, everything's good to go. And this actually turned out a lot better than I expected. In fact, this guitar, it's a wonderful sounding instrument, so I'm really glad to have it back in action. And having this fret that doesn't buzz any longer is terrific. Don't want to look too hard. I might find a couple of them that need to have a little bit of work done, but again, like I say, I'll be patient and wait for the frets to wear a little bit so that I can recrown and level all of them later on.